Lovely. So thank you very much, guys, for coming in and being open to discuss some topics here today about the creative community. Seems we've landed on packaging is what we're going to be talking about today. And of course, like last time, I just wanted to kind of extend out that anybody who's watching this and is interested, please extend out to myself or anybody in the group and reach out and just let us know that you'd like to be involved, and we can try and include you somehow. So just to kind of start off, if we can kind of start off to my left here, kind of do a little bit of introductions.
I'm Scott Suki. Right now I'm known by just, Suki Design. I'm pretty new to, this group. I haven't had a official public release yet of anything, but in this, last beginning of the COVID year, I had a private release where, I was asked to come up with a bunch of awards and decided, well, what could I do that's something unique and I'm interested in? And then it popped in my head, ooh, I'll do a toy. And, to make matters worse on myself, I decided, well, under a time limit, let's also rotocast them. So I had to learn rotocasting and, get geared up for that. But once I got done with that, I decided, hey, this is really fun. This is something I want to take, my personal art, in that direction and see what I can come up with. So I've been spending the last year just really trying to reach out and see what everybody's doing and trying to learn as much as I can from everybody else who's, been doing it for a while.
Cool. And I'm Jonathan, also known as Kerfloss. I've been at this part of this community now for about like 8 months, I think. And I make 3.75-inch armature kits and bounty buddies, and also working on an action figure from the movie Prospect, kind of in the traditional Kenner wax sculpt style. Yeah, next.
I guess that would be me. Hi, my name is Al Dominguez. I'm known as Barrio Boba. I've been only messing around with resin and silicone maybe for, I want to say, less than a year. Just trying to. I've been watching a bunch of videos on YouTube initially, and I've had this kind of dream project in my mind, but to get there, I had to basically figure out what to do with silicone and resin. So I've been watching a lot of videos, a lot of trial and error, a lot of cussing in English and Spanish, trying to figure out, what works, what doesn't work, how can I improve the next wave and whatnot. And I'm now working on wave 3 of releasing these mashups of homie figures and Star Wars. I know some of you guys have some of these little dudes out there, so some of these guys are out in the wild, and it's crazy. I make these things because I think they're cool and I like them. So I post pictures and then people end up liking them too. And that trips me out quite a bit. And I'm glad. But that's pretty much what I see. Yeah, see, there's a Bosco right there out in the wild. Awesome. Totally awesome. And like I said, I've got a dream project that I'm working on. I may have put the cart before the horse here, but we're going to talk about packaging this week. But my dream project, I've already got the packaging down. I just need to work on the figure.
And sometimes you got to say toys, if you don't mind giving us a little introduction of yourself.
Hey, how are you? It's me. Hey. I make the wood toys, so. Yeah, it's nice to join in this. I'm new to the toy world, or at least making them. I just started in last April, and it's been rad. So I'm stoked to be able to be a part of this group here and join in and get some. I'm like, like I said, I'd love to mess with resin someday, especially because I starts messing around with wood, so maybe I could cast something that I make. But yeah, I'm at my very early learning stages of everything, so I'd love to just be on a fly on the wall and just listen in on those of you who have experience.
Cool. Very cool.
And thanks again, Crumbs, for putting this together, man. Cheers, buddy. Appreciate it.
Honestly, thank you guys for giving up parts of your evening and stuff for doing this, because it means a lot. It helps my understanding as well. So we're just kind of looking at some of the discussion points we have here. One of the first ones we kind of talked about is, why is packaging there and what is its function? So somebody wants to start off that conversation on why is the packaging there? What is its function in the indie art world?
It's almost a more philosophical one than anything. I guess it obviously depends on what angle you're approaching, your work and your pieces. Is it more of an homage and a recreation of one's experiences going through the store and the experience of, going through the aisles and seeing nothing but packages and wanting to, recreate a piece of that feeling of a young, excited consumer, versus the other end of the spectrum where, you're approaching it first and foremost as a work of art. And, the packaging just happens to be in tow with, whatever figure or whatever you're making. So I guess that's what, personally, I am interested to know from everybody is, which angle are you coming at from it more? Myself, day job, I'm a graphic designer, so I obviously have a love of, those cleanly, neatly designed and with very specific purposes and messages, in mind, and that angle of things. While I still also appreciate it very much as a work of art. But I guess that's what I'm curious, where everybody's coming from, what different directions to approach this, project, however you want to qualify it.
For me, packaging has come from, I guess my attraction to packaging starts in the aisle. Thinking about walking down Walmart's toy aisle, Target's toy aisle, and being able to recognize the toy I'm looking for based not on the blister and the figure inside it, but by the packaging first. I see the packaging as one that kind of visual connection point that allows the toy maker to show off the brand, or to make the brand recognizable, and which from a mainstream perspective, you've got to attract eyes going down the toy aisle and connect with the brand that they see in advertising. But I think it could be a very different perspective than that when our toys that aren't in aisles, the packaging has a different purpose, or can be an homage to that original mainstream intention. But I've seen a lot of works from other artists where the card back or the header card are just a canvas to further express the creativity, whatever statement they want to make. I think of Gul of Gaba. His are probably a more notable packaging design at the moment, and just how he's kind of in a way the figures become secondary to this package experience. But I think in my own approach, I'm also thinking about the practicality of how I'm going to package these things, because I want to save money, or not get complicated with a blister, and so instead I might do like a windowless box, which I've seen that there are others who do similar. But yeah, I think there's a very practical component to it, and the way people choose which direction to go.
I have always been stoked out on packaging. like ever since I started following, bootleg makers and stuff, like the packaging has been kind of like half the fun, at least for me, in appreciating the toy and the work and what they do. As for myself, I do a lot of, I'm a prop maker, and I do a lot of, I've done a lot of graphic design stuff as well with prop making, depending on what project I'm doing. So getting back into working on Photoshop and doing toy packaging has been like really half the fun for me. And then kind of the contrast of like making a wooden toy and then getting on a computer and getting on Photoshop and designing a package and then combining the two is kind of like weird archaic wooden toy and up to date current technology combining. But I wish I had I wish I can at the same time wish I could actually draw out my packaging like dreadful things. His artwork is incredible, as well as many other. The Ghouls guy you mentioned, this artist Reyes, I got one of his toys, which was also like very much so the packaging with his hand drawn art was way more the focal point than the actual toy itself. So it's cool. It's like a whole other side of it, but it definitely starts with the attraction of going down the toy aisle and just being like overly stimulated with just action figures and packaging, and it's from movie clips on them to drawing, and it's amazing. But yeah, so I get stoked out when I actually have like a good pack. I don't really think a lot of my packaging is that great. I kind of skate through with what I can do, but there's been a couple I've done that I was pretty impressed with. I'm like, yeah, that was a good one. But yeah,
Yeah, there's another toy maker on here that I follow, is Slug Toys. He posted, I think, in his story today that toys are time travel, and to me, so that's a big aspect of it, right? So it's not so much the toy itself, but the packaging too, right? If you grew up in the late 70s or early 80s or whatever, I mean, I always, no matter what store we went to, I always look for the toy aisle. I tell my mom, I'm going to the toys. You can spend 2 hours doing whatever else. I'm going to be in the toys. You can come look for me and find me in the toys, and I'll be in the toys. And even to this day, I'm talking 40 years later, no matter what store I go to, even if it's a grocery store, I'll look for the toy aisle. And I'm looking at toys, and I'm taking them off the racks, and I'm looking at the packaging. I'm looking at the front, at the back, and it's time travel for me. So I think packaging helps tell a big story. If you grew up with, I'll give you an example, like G.I. Joe's, the G.I. Joe figures from the early 80s. I mean, holy cow, talk about artwork.
Yeah.
I mean, just with the little like starburst behind each figure, and each figure making its, respective face or being angry or whatever. Even Cobra Commander, who had the stupid shield in front of his face, you could tell he was still making a face under that. It's just, it's a story, and I think it's part of that story. And so while my first couple waves of figures have some really simple packaging, I'm and I know my limitations. I can't draw to save my life, but I know some other people out there that can draw and make some incredible card backs and whatnot. And so I may collaborate with a local artist to kind of put some stuff together for me for, like a limited release or whatnot. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this, I do have a dream project, and the dream project is actually going to be an homage to Polish Star Wars bootleg figures that were released in the late 80s. As a kid, I hated bootlegs because they didn't look like the figures from the movie, and they didn't look like the figures that the kid had down the street. They were similar, but not the same. And I would get pissed off as a kid, but now as an adult, I freaking love them. I can't get enough of bootlegs, and the worse design, the more off they look, the more screwed up the packaging, the more I can't get enough. So my dream project is going to have an homage. It's going to look, I have the card back already ready to go, at least designed anyway. And it's just cutting and pasting and kind of switching some things around in Microsoft Publisher. And hopefully that'll come out here in the next couple of months when I fire up the pressure pot. But I think, it's, to me, packaging is time travel, and it's a big part of the story of the figure in its little plastic tube.
I'll partially agree that it's time travel, just in and of the fact that I'm more often going down the toy aisles nowadays going, damn it, why didn't I have these when I was a kid?
Oh yeah, yeah, I totally agree.
So I'm gonna play a little bit of devil's advocate here, only because like I've got a bit of a marketing brain. So for me, Kurt Floss, you nailed it on the point at the beginning where you're talking about like, from the perspective of going down an aisle. So for me, when I think of packaging, a lot of times when I think of like its function and why is it there, I'm like, okay, safety reasons, people can't be touching it, loss prevention, all these weird marketing reasons go through my brain. And then of course, just like if you were a company and you were hiring an artist to do the packaging, I can sometimes be a bit like that weird grump where I'm like, well, why are we hiring this phenomenal artist to do this beautiful? Don't we just need it in a bag for the kids to find on the shelf? So my marketing brain does sometimes go there. But on the other part of it, I definitely understand what you're saying with like the story and the time capsule. And I'm going to actually grab a piece that just happens to be right beside me, because in my opinion, this is a good example where to see this character, you're like, okay, that's Skeletor. And then you realize, well, no, this is He-Man's arms. That's actually He-Man's legs. This is an awful, awful bootleg. And then you see this lovely packaging that says it's actually the Hero de la Lucha Libre. And so this is from like 1989, brings you right back in time to a whole other world of toys where it's like without this and being able to attach it to this, you kind of lose that whole time capsule and that whole story. So it's interesting that the moment that you kind of separate from that commercial world into the indie art world, the packaging clearly has a very, very different function. Whether it be just to hold the object, or because Kurt Floss, I would even say the way that you pop your instruction manual and have that displayed out there is actually a form of packaging for your product. And Barry Boba, I would even say the little topper on yours, considering the size of it, that's actually very reminiscent, in my opinion, to something like a gumball machine, where you'd sometimes get like the little fold up ones. So it's like, it's interesting how you still see the packaging goes in full circle. Like sometimes you gotta say toys. I had to kind of chuckle when you said that, your backers, you're not too stoked on, because I was literally even just looking at your page earlier today and the amount of color that you had on your Art 2D2.
Yeah.
And I feel like, again, like that's one of those things where like it becomes part of the focal point. So I love that so far. It seems like we all kind of agree, like it does serve a different function, and it serves a very unique function probably for everybody even.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, the more I do it and get the more toys I make, the more packaging I make, the more, I open and, my spectrum widens than what I can do with it and what I want to do with it. And, at first I was really narrow minded and like, make it look like a Star Wars packaging, or make it, now I'm kind of wanting to do more of an artistic, like put a little bit more of an artistic twist, a little bit more interesting. And I have been dealing with more colors now too, which is, all my characters up until recently have just been plain wood, which is kind of like my shtick, I guess. At first, I just didn't, when I started to come out with them, it was very intimidating for me to try to add color to them. I was kind of like, well, they stoked out in how they look enough. I was like, I don't know if I could really, and I might ruin it. So it was, but thank you. I appreciate that.
And I can't help it, so I'm going to dive in one last one. The individual who makes the Monstro Suppressas, actual Slugger toys, he's actually an individual who has a background from Mexico. And as a child, he remembers buying almost like the fruit mesh, and there'd be a bunch of toys and candy in there. So he actually sells his toys in that to kind of pay homage to what he would see as a child. So again, it's the whole functionality of the packaging. So then, sorry, did anybody else have anything else to add to that before we move on to the next kind of discussion point?
No, I think it's really interesting to hear everybody's, how they feel about it and everything. And I like that everybody was, or is very much into the packaging. Cause I would not have 100% bet that everybody would be on that end, figuring there's got to be somebody that's like, hey, sculpting's my strong suit. That's really my thing. I only do the packaging because it's kind of expected to go along with, and otherwise I would have thrown it in a Ziploc bag and called it a day. So
I can sometimes be that person, so I'm in. We might end up there. So actually, we're at the how much time / expense should be exerted toward it.
Depends on what you're trying to achieve. Like, if you are a mainstream producer, you're thinking about the expense of and the production implications of mass production, like a really high volume. If you have 10, you can put 90% of your time or 10% of your time. Yeah. And what do you have a budget for? Do you have you trying to sell one to get to the next? Maybe your first run is going to be a lower quality, or not where you want it to be, and you're going to use your money from there to make the next one better.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's for me anyway, I try to concentrate on one thing at a time. So I'm going to nail down molding. I got to make sure that I get molding down first and that I understand. And when I look at something, I can automatically think, okay, I already know how I'm going to mold that up. And so then that gets conquered. Okay, so that's molded. All right, so now I'm going to pour resin. Okay, how am I going to pour the resin in this thing to make sure that I eliminate all the bubbles and all that other stuff? And then, so it's a slow progression, right? So, I mean, the very first Barrio Bobo I pulled from a mold, I didn't think that I would be here a few months later, working on wave 3 already. But it's just one of those things. And then, okay, so I've got all these figures out and they're ready and they're painted. Now, how am I going to put them out there? And then so it kind of, challenges you to try new things. The labels I make, it's got the little header on it where it's not that, it's not all that crazy. It's just a tiny little header on a little plastic bag. But, I want to give it a certain aesthetic. So you start thinking about, okay, so I want to use Star Wars font so that, yes, it's a tiny little figure and it's a mashup, but I still wanted to give some recognition. So then you start thinking about, okay, how am I going to develop the font? Where can I find it? I don't have it. What's it going to take to print? Can I print it or not? And it's a rabbit hole that has multiple rabbit holes in it. So, at some point you got to stop and say, okay, no, I can't do that. I can't think about that yet. Let's put that on the back burner and focus on something else. But it's one of those things that, at least for me recently, I mean, that's all I think about now. And my wife will kind of back me up and say, oh man, I've got toys on the mind. And labeling and packaging and what am I going to do and how am I going to do it? So that's where I'm at.
I guess for packaging, just always been strongly drawn to it in general. But as far as regarding my own, toys, it's here's the first one that I, did up, just a simple, front and back card. But part of my process is doing that mental math of, obviously that one, was not for sale, but, still had to figure out, okay, how much work and effort's going into everything versus how far can I mark up the price on that to cover the costs, because I'm not going to, swallow the cost on the packaging, it's going to be figured into the overall cost of the piece. And at what point, does it cross that line that, at least in my head, that people would be like, no, it's not worth it to me. I'm not going to buy that. And, I start losing sales because, purely the packaging marked it up to, a $300, tiny little whatever, that people are like, well, it's almost like, getting a new iPhone where you're like, wow, half the cost is, the fancy Apple box, you know, and you feel a little ripped off and you're like, really, they're marking it up for that. So that's that mental dance I always have in my head of, figuring out how much is too much. But that's also why I'm always trying to figure out, is this something I can remotely get the quality I want by figuring out how to do it myself? So, for right now, I'm obviously, going to my neighborhood commercial printer and, and even size, shape, and everything's obviously, factored on what budget I can figure to work with. But, on the side, I'm currently trying to figure out, okay, let's figure out the 3D modeling software so I can 3D model and, create, my own custom bucks. And when I get, the vacuum former that I'm currently working on finishing up with a buddy of mine, and just do all my own vacuum forming. And if I can get the quality I want, hey, great. There's a huge price savings, and therefore I can also get even fancier. So.
Wow.
Yeah, that is pretty fancy.
So, sometimes to a detriment of ever actually getting the project finished.
Right. Yeah, sometimes you get stuck on an idea or a concept or whatever, and you try to perfect it, and it's an infinite loop where you just get stuck on something. I totally understand.
Does anybody else have anything to add to that? Sorry.
I started just making my own like card backs. I was at first I would buy these things that were already a card back and blister together, and then I just decided to start making my own card backs, and I just get all my blisters from Dove. Obviously he's a big proprietor of that stuff for everybody. Yeah, so that's I enjoy making as much as I can make myself. I'm more stoked on it. So vacuum forming blisters someday would be super cool. So I'd love to hear how that goes for sure.
I'll definitely let everybody know.
Yeah.
Are you getting the actual card backs from a specific source too, along with the blisters, or?
I did at first, which was this guy I found on Amazon, which was selling like basically the 6x9 back with the regular blister. I'm not exactly sure what it's like, the medium, I would say, figure size.
Okay, but it was like Etsy small seller manufacturer.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It was a small guy, and it was I believe I think it was like $15 for 4, which when I think about it now, it's pretty steep. But but at the time it was a motivator. You know what I mean? Like getting my first little pack of those blanks with the blister was like, okay, now I got to make something to put in them. So that was kind of like one of the first things I did to really get me to start doing stuff.
So you bought the packaging first, and it was like, what am I going to put inside of it?
Yeah, well, I always wanted to do this, which was funny. It was like something I was like, I'd followed many toy makers. Yeah, Edwin Salas, of course, was a huge influence of mine, and someone I had followed for a while, as well as just messaged back and forth, because I have worked with wood for a while, and I used to make a lot of street art wood toys, which something I would leave at different places, sometimes up to 24-foot high wood sculpture type things I would put at places. Yeah.
So what kind of
was too high? Let's put things in a little box.
Yeah, exactly. So like
it was
something I was wanting to get into, and he was somebody that was an influence, and I just never really had a lot of time because I was working pretty heavily until pandemic hit. So that of course opened up a lot of time for me to get into this, which this whole serendipitous thing, really, if you think about it.
Yeah.
But really I had that packaging for almost, I'd probably say 4 or 5 months before I even started making anything, and they were just sitting there kind of looking at me. I'm like, I got to do something. And I did. So that's how it was. That's where I was going with that. Sorry.
So the two of you actually said something that actually hits like right on the nail for me personally, because you both mentioned how it can be expensive when you're producing the packaging. And then of course it starts making you don't want to push that onto the customer. But of course, you're not going to swallow that expense. So that's where I find it does get really difficult in the bootleg toy scene. Because at the end of the day, I understand a lot of these individuals are artists. They consider themselves artists, and therefore the vision to complete the entirety of the piece includes that packaging, whether it be their intent is for it to pay homage, or whether it to be because they just wanted to express themselves through like the use of color or through the imagery, whatever the intent might be that they chose the packaging. I do feel that a lot of customers, when they're seeing the item, and especially because a lot of the times people are posting it photographed on an all white place, photographed on an all black background, photographed on this table. It's not every artist who's actually showcasing it in a backer and saying like, yeah, I did a collab with Luke Tobias, or yeah, Non-Heinous did this backer. So it's not always that they're actually doing a full-on collab. Sometimes I guess when you start actually kind of enumerating, again, my marketing brain starts enumerating, where I start trying to think of like, okay, well, wait a minute. I'm somebody who's buying the handcrafted piece. And I almost sometimes see it as kind of like, if I told somebody I love that painting, I'd love to buy it. And they said, not a problem. Let me just matte and frame it for you. Ooh, we're in a totally different new price range. And sometimes I do wonder, it's like, okay, if you see a piece at a gallery and it's already framed and matted and it's $1,000, do you accept the fact that the matte and the frame has been worked into that price? You love it as it is, a complete piece? Or is that any different than you saying, I love that painting, and the artist saying, well, let me matte and frame it for you for $1,000? You have no choice. My vision is this piece, this matte, this frame, you want to buy it, you're taking it in that whole thing and you're paying that price. So that's where sometimes I do kind of wonder with the packaging, is it the artist's intent of what they see the vision for the end piece? Or does it actually come down to what the customer is willing to pay to include that in on the piece? Because I would even say some of them, a piece can't really exist without the backer. I've got one on my wall. It's WAP, Weaponized Assault Penguin. Well, if I take it out of the backer with it has the meme for that, it's now just a penguin with a gun. And I can't really explain that to everybody who sees it. That's supposed to represent the pop song WAP, but in the format of a weaponized assault penguin. So in my opinion, like that, you've put it in a box. Like it has to be with that backer. But sometimes I do wonder then, like, okay, but if you're just building this, you're paying to get X amount of copies at Staples, your local place, and you've paid artists to make the backer and all these other things. Neil Stalgia, I wish he was here, because he and I have talked about this before. His first release ever, he released a quiz or a little poll on Instagram asking, how would you want your figure to be received? And the craziest thing is his customers said, in a bag, disassembled. His entire first drop, every customer said, I'd like to receive your product in a baggie, not together. If you told most toy guys in the community that are spending a fortune and hours and racking their brain on how to package it, make a poll and see what your customers want. I wonder how many would say, I've got this vision, man. And how many would be like, oh, I should see. Because like if I go to the market and buy bread, nobody asks me like, did you want your Wonder Bread in this special one? No, it's worked into the price. So I would say, like, when you start working at the, how much time expense should be exerted, and then should this be factored into the cost? I would even almost say it comes to the same as in my line of work. You have to look at the individual artist. So the issue is if I've got a particular artist who's coming in and they might say to me, like, I need mostly all my funds in marketing, and I need a small chunk of my funds to go towards like a really good beat, and I need the mixing and mastering to be like next level. Okay, that's how we're going to plot out your budget. And of course, we're going to kind of look at things too, because if you're telling me that you actually need your content to be like, but it turns out that you have no advertising budget and nobody knows who you are, no, we're going to put the money into your advertising budget. Versus there's some of these guys that they really don't need to put the advertising budget out there. And like a Healy May doesn't need to say to you, I'm going to put this on a backer that's been designed by, crazy new street artist Banksy. It's like, Healy can sell it on a table. So I'd be curious to see, like, does anybody have any thoughts then? Like, where would almost become like a scary line of a percentage of your overall product that you'd say it becomes almost intimidating to pass that on to the customer?
I think it is actually going to be, at least for me, piece to piece dependent. For instance, I might just come up with a really cool figure that needs no story. It's just cool looking. And I can throw that in a baggie and there you go. It doesn't need any visuals to help back it up or further to story or get background or anything like that. So obviously then I can keep, costs really low. But in contrast, right now I'm working on a piece that, for my first public release, as it were, without the packaging to back it up, the whole thing's parody. So without the packaging, the piece itself, you just look at it and you'd be like, what the hell is this? So the package is absolutely, part of the overall finished piece. It amounts to the sum of the parts. But I can also suggest, with the marketing brain, there are probably a lot of pieces that probably as good business people, we might sit back and look and go, okay, I have a cool piece. I can put it with a really nice package that will increase the value. So how about I do a real simple package at a lower price point for the people that aren't interested in the package, or can't afford a higher price point, and then I can have a limited number in the deluxe packaging, charge more for it, and again, still offer the same product, but in a little more, luxurious method that, will also attract a lot of people.
I think that's a great example of buyers have preference, and yeah, that's I think we see that like better packaging, at a higher price point in so many different products. But you also gave the example earlier of the iPhone and the kind of package that it comes in, and I think about that, and I think about what that says to me is the experience you have in unboxing something, and that's very much like on brand for Apple, and in that way, all the Apple products kind of have this high end package feel to it. Pieces just fit together, slide well together, kind of thing. It's a part of their brand. It extends into the experience you have with their products. A toy maker can have that same can kind of build their brand around that experience of receiving the piece, of opening it, of removing it, and or the packaging is even a part of the display. You put it on the shelf, with your with the figure inside or outside or something. And so I think the packaging says a lot about says a lot or can say a lot about the brand, and can kind of be this kind of theme throughout multiple releases. You can always expect a designer who kind of puts their attention into their packaging to carry that through. In a way that can kind of either set a high bar at the beginning, or it's something that you build up to over time. Yeah, I think at the same time, people would buy an iPhone out of a baggie also. They're familiar with the product. It's like, you just want the phone, you're going to toss the packaging anyways, and fill up the landfill kind of thing. But it's still always that like first time buyer experience, is how you build loyalty in the long run.
Now that you framed it as, packaging as an experience, I'm going to have to absolutely do my best to refrain from all future releases being packaged inside of a glitter bomb.
Part of the experience.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was going to say, with the dream project that I have, which is the homage to Polish bootlegs, when you think of bootleg figures and you think of, some guy sitting in his garage or a couple guys in their garage, hey, you know what, let's make some figures. The first couple runs of the figure, to include the painting and the figure itself and including the packaging, are going to be kind of crappy. It's like, it's my first run, it's my first go. And so I plan to incorporate that in my first couple of releases. And I'm going to be explicit about it. I'm going to say, you know what, this is an homage to those guys that didn't have this in their country, and they got together and they slapped together some plastic, and this is what they put out. So the prototype is made and it's kind of crappy, and that's okay. And so the packaging will be that way too. But with every subsequent release, because I do plan on making a few releases of these in different color schemes, with each subsequent release, the figure will get better, the painting will get sharper, and the packaging will be a little better. You know what I mean? So I have put some thought into it, and that's how I plan to roll with it. And one of the problems I have with some bootleggers and some guys that make some incredible pieces is I can't rip them out of their plastic little tube, because it's going to mess up the card back. So that weighs on my mind too, because I'm one of those guys that when I was a kid, when I would buy a cassette or a CD, I would open it and stick my nose in it. That smell of the fresh plastic or the CD, or holding that thing in your hand and just sitting staring at it before you slap on the weapons and then went outside and buried it in the yard. But it's that part of the experience. So, the first couple of releases are going to be, the bubbles are going to be stapled on, because that's how the Polish bootleggers did it. They just had a stapler with some rusty staples and they stapled it on the card. But with each subsequent release, I will improve on that. So instead of staples, it'll be, some tape. And then, subsequently, I found these little Velcro discs that you can put on there so that you can actually remove the bubble from it. And then I know of a different guy who has a 2-piece bubble, where it's the little frame and then the actual bubble itself fits right over it and fits snug so that the figure doesn't fall out. So I've given it some thought, and those are the things that I've got going on. Again, it's one of those things where you want to preserve the packaging too, and you can take the figure out and hold it, mess around, like Titty Bean does with his. He puts them to fight one another. You can do all that or whatever, and then at the end of the day, you can just put it back in the box or put it back in the thing and set it on your shelf.
I think probably one of my favorite parts that kind of came up in there, vomiting droids. His packaging, as somebody who, I'll admit, like I'm typically not a big packaging person, so I'm kind of odd man out. Vomiting droids, he takes scrap cardboard and just cuts it into random sheets and rectangles, and then we'll sit there while he's doing stuff with the family, and he'll just start writing out, Acid Wasteland Mother, and then he'll start writing a description for this thing. And that will just get slid into an envelope. And even the moment you open up one of his boxes, there'll be like this big letter, "Welcome to the Acid Wasteland." And all of a sudden you just start reading this whole thing, and you almost feel like you're like playing Jumanji or something. As you go through the box and you pull out these figures. And I think what I love about that is he captures and emulates everything we're kind of talking about with this whole idea of the experience, with it being a part of the piece. And he does it all with time. Time is one of the most valuable things in the world, and it's so precious. And in my opinion, the idea that this individual sits there and writes out all these backers and all these stories explaining to you this world you're about to enter, I don't have time to write notes or letters to my loved ones, let alone some person across the globe buying something from me. So to see that they've taken the time to write that, I would even say sometimes like the time that goes into the packaging and the intent. Like when you're talking about the Polish figures, and how sometimes like the intent is to kind of have that whole like shoddy because it's what you can do. I wish more of the dudes would actually embrace educating some of the collectors on the history of bootlegs. Because the issue is that when I first came in, I might have looked at a piece and gone, oh, that flashing. Until you see your own friggin' real bootleg, and then you see the hands just buried and flashing, and you realize like, ooh, why wasn't this individual playing on that fact? I feel like the packaging very much can be a part of that as well. Sorry. So segueing into packaging types and their purposes. So what kind of packaging types, like you were actually discussing a couple different packaging types you've seen. I'll be honest, for me, I know of like a backer with a blister. And then I basically know of a clamshell that it's just the pops open. And otherwise I basically know of like various bags. Oh, and of course, statuette boxes, right? With the window view. Other than those, like what are some of the other kind of like packaging types that you guys would say that you're familiar with either in commercial toy products or that you've seen in the indie scene that are pretty wild?
I'm not sure if I've seen anybody actually utilize it yet, but I've seen from time to time, and it kind of gets to what was mentioned before, in efforts to not destroy the package, but still be able to open it up and experience the toy, but leave that beautiful, pristine package alone. I've been looking at and researching, and part of why I want to start doing my own custom forms is it's like a standard card back, but it's double. So the card back itself is a clamshell with a cutout window all the way through. So you actually use, two bubbles. So you can actually loosely secure it and it folds open. You pull the toy out and put it back without being a full blown clamshell. So for me to be able to, print both sides and, figure all that out, because I also just love the process and the problem solving behind it as well. So that's what I've been looking at lately, potentially for, similar kind of thing, but it's actually, the backer card itself is what, opens and closes. But yeah, that's what I've been looking into lately.
And even that, I'd say like the varieties of the functionality of them, the amount that actually reopen and close back up. I think we would all kind of agree, like there's a level of respect for the effort, the time, the finances that have gone into making that backer. I think all of us here, the last thing we want to do is actually cause any damage to that backer as we get to the figure. I can't speak for anybody else. I've definitely been that guy where it's like, week one, you pull a corner. Week two, you maybe tug the corner a little bit more. And then before you know it, you're like, I'll just safely run a blade across the whole base here. And suddenly you've got like the cardboard all tearing up in a line. But even some of the mediums that the guys use, Barrio Boba, you mentioned Titty Bean's Velcro. But if you're really lucky, every now and then the guys will use hot glue gun as well. Now, I don't think it's intentional that they're using the hot glue gun, but hot glue gun doesn't like plastic, obviously. So you can actually really nicely peel those ones off and it doesn't mess up the backer. How do you guys feel about somebody opening up a figure? Like, do you all here open up your figures, or if it's sealed, like?
I wanted to bring this up. I was just kind of waiting for an opportunity because I'm a sealer, I mean, everything I've done, I've sealed, and I don't know, maybe I just wasn't observant enough or just not introduced to enough a variety of toy makers, but I always thought that was like the whole art form, was to have the sealed character and the sealed package that you designed, and that was the art, the toy art. It's not, these are collectible items, and they're not meant to like open up and go outside and bury out in your backyard like you did as a kid. These are like, I'm going to put them on my shelf with all my other awesome art toys. That's probably across the way from, the toys that are out of the package that I played with that are on this shelf. So like, that's how I've always taken it, that the toys I make are the ones that go on the art shelf. recently I've been thinking about that because I do articulation on my figures, and I'm like, well, what's the point of going through, because it can be a real pain in the ass when you're doing these little wood pegs to make these arms and legs move. So I'm like, why am I going through all this trouble if I'm going to seal it in this pack, and it's not really meant to open up. So, I'm very curious. I'd love the input. Like, should I stick with this theory, or should I start moving on to maybe actually letting people play with my wooden toys?
I'm the person that was very neurotic growing up, where it just distressed me to no end to even see somebody peel a sticker off the backing. Like, mine was the generation where everybody, maybe everybody's did, you ran around grade school with a big sticker album to just show off your sticker collection. Yeah. And, everybody was peeling off the stickers and putting it in the book, which, in my mind, an angel died every time they did that. So I'm very much of, if I get a commercially available toy, that I like enough, I'm bad. I will often buy two, one to take out of the package and actually check out the toy, and the other one that I don't disturb the beautiful package. But obviously I can't afford to do that most of the times with, any designer artwork pieces. Although I wish I could.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've bought figures that come sealed. It's a guy makes a run of 10, and you get the card back and it's cool and everything, and the figure is sealed, and I want to rip it out of there. Again, it's that whole experience of holding it, of smelling it, of looking at it, of holding it up against other figures or whatever. And eventually, sometimes those bubbles do come off, just with time. I'll give you an example here. I have this guy here. It's a little tiny little, kind of like a little Shogun warrior of a little Boba Fett. The bubble finally just came off. It just fell off. And so I was like, all right, cool. So let me take the figure out. I took the figure out and everything else. And I can do it now because, and here's the little figure now. I can, and I repaired the bubble. Sorry, by putting little Velcro tabs on there. So now the bubble can come off, and I can take the figure out and I can play with it. So, it's one of those things that I take into consideration again with this dream project is, if you want to keep it stapled to the card and you want to put it up on your shelf, then that's up to you. If you want to rip it out of there and you want to pose it with all the other cool stuff you have, and if it's magnetically articulated and you want to do some kit bashing with other magnetically articulated figures and you want to swap pieces, and go for it, so it's something that I do put a lot of thought in. If you're taking the time to make those wooden figures with articulation, then guess what? You're kind of having an expectation that someone's going to take it out of the package and it's going to want to set it up.
And deep down secretly I am.
Yeah, you want them to take it out. You want them to, play with the legs, or turn the head or whatever. And it's one of those, yeah. Do I keep it entombed in its plastic little thing forever for the bubble to turn yellow, 20 years from now, or do I bust that thing out and actually, touch it, smell it, play with it, whatever. Yeah. And so I think that's how I think going forward. When I make my Barrio Boba figures, I put them in a little plastic bag, and you can keep them in there if you want, but they're meant to come out. They're meant to come out, and for you to hot glue under your dashboard as little saints in there on your dashboard as you drive down the road. You can, throw them at your kids if they're yelling at you from across a room, although I wouldn't recommend it, but you can. They're meant to come out of there. They're meant for you to touch and smell and feel and all that.
Let them breathe.
Offers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So recently, an artist offered something that really caught me off guard, because I know they spent a lot of time on their backers, and they reached out and they were like, "I know you love to sniff and lick everything. Would you like yours left out of the package for when you get it?" And I was actually like, "Dude, I respect that it's the entire process that you do. Don't want to be any extra stress. You send it out how you want to send it out." And he was straight up just like, man, I throw your blister in the packaging with the double-sided tape and I put your backer beside it. You can play with it and you can seal it up when you're ready. And for some reason, the fact he was like just new and was willing to do that was kind of like, dang. Because now even when I get it, if I want to go Velcro like Barbo did, I can just go get some Velcro and I can access it whenever I want. And I do feel like there's almost like a very strange misunderstanding of how us grown men play with our toys. We do touch them. We do touch them. Same time too, like the other day, I was wearing gloves because I had been doing some stuff with dye and I scrubbed my hands. I used like an ethanol remover, paint thinner, and I still couldn't get it off. So I wore cotton little gloves whenever I was touching any of the toys I was working on, because the last thing I wanted was to end up getting any of the brown dye onto those figures. And I think sometimes, like my buddy Pocket Toyco took a screenshot of me the one day because I didn't realize, but I was looking at a toy. And when you actually see the way, if you slow down for a moment and you actually like whatever, like screenshot somebody when they're looking at a piece that likes to touch their pieces, you realize it's almost like they're looking at like a cup of water in a desert. In no way are they looking at this thing like they're about to like whip it around the house or something. Like they're looking at this thing, inspecting it, and the brain is going. Because for me personally, I start seeing like how they maybe did something, why they maybe did something a particular way. Ooh, how they blended the colors. Ooh, what color did they go with first as the base color? And somebody start actually looking around this thing and start seeing like some of the engineering, some of the problem solving, some of even like their little marks. Somebody the other day, I was looking at their toy, it was hollow all up the center. And I'd never seen a figure that was just hollow all the way up it. And he was like, oh yeah, I had seen the rainbow yawn with the skull, so I did it on my little 2-inch guys. And so it's like, in my opinion, to be able to hold the toy gives you a whole new grasp of like what went into it. You can really respect a piece differently too. When you're just seeing it in the package, sometimes I find the packaging will like take away from the piece because you're looking at this like whole thing. It's kind of like when somebody will make a print out of a painting. The painting might be this big, but then they'll take a beautiful HD photo of like this little chunk. And I find like when you all of a sudden have that little chunk, you can look at it at home and you love it. And I feel like that's almost what the piece is when you remove it from the painting. You can always enjoy it when it's up there, but the ability to be able to pull it out at will and then be able to really inspect it. Oh, so
yeah. And that's my intention, you know, with the bubbles that you can open and take that figure out. If you want to leave it in there, leave it in there. If you want to bust that thing out and you know, play with the articulation or not, or inspect it and see, you know what, this is where he messed up. Look at this air bubble here, or look at, you know, he missed some paint here. That's all up to you, you know, and that's what I intend with this carded figure I've got brewing in my head. And you know, if you want to do it, good. If you don't, then don't. You know, it's up to you.
Oh, Crumbs, you brought up the point of being able to look at all sides of the figure, and you know, I'd say in large part, toys are three-dimensional, and there is consideration made all the way around it. And if you keep it in the package, you're only seeing one side. So you know, and I think you also kind of your enthusiasm for the way a figure is made, which is an enthusiasm that I share, and I think we all might share, is just a discovery and a wonder about the process that went into making something, which may be different from the person who isn't a maker as well and is just a collector. Maybe it is enough to see it in the package from one side, because the value is in the brand or or just the image of the figure, and maybe less so in its production. But I know if I would, you know, if I buy anything from anyone here, I am immediately opening it because I want to understand how you made it, and certainly articulate it when articulation is there.
Good to know. I guess I'll start leaving just Velcro ends or something. That's funny because I just like actually like, when I do packaging, sometimes it's, you know, I don't know about you guys, but you know, sometimes it doesn't always work out the first time. You print whatever it is, something is not lined up right. So I'm just going to show you an example of something I do is like when I do print stuff out, this is the new bigger card thing that I did. I use like I'll use like snot tape to line everything up first, you know, and then. But I'm also realizing that snot tape can also work as something that you can just, you know, open and close your package with as well pretty easily. Well, sort of pretty easily. But anyhow, yeah.
So something I find interesting with the packaging, you brought up actually, sometimes you got to say toys, that you felt that was always kind of part of the aesthetic for the culture. So
Yeah.
I've had an experience before with an artist who has actually said, I can't wait till I get my non-openable, because I'm sick of you toy dudes touching my toys. And suddenly you're like, oh, dang, this is art. And I was very much kind of like, oh crap, because in no way did I mean an offense to the artist, but clearly this artist was very much like, yo, like I can't wait till I get it so they don't open, because I'm sick of toy dudes touching my art. And you're sitting there kind of being like, oh crap, no idea. Now, what's weird to me is that my partner would actually say like, well, you know, I throw all my packaging out. And when they told me that, I was sitting there like, because I never even thought about that. And so I couldn't help myself. I told one of my art buddies, I was like, you know, I know this individual who's savage. They just rip it and throw it. And his response was, they bought it. To see those polar opposites from two artists, the one that's kind of like, customer bought it,
Yeah.
to the other one that's kind of like, don't you dare touch it. It was just like, okay, so how do you navigate this carefully as a consumer? Because I don't want, the last thing I ever want to do is accidentally offend somebody, because that gets tough. If this is the conceptual piece and all of a sudden they see you have it on your shelf, have you just insulted the customer? Or should it actually matter as long as the person who bought it is getting what they wanted from the piece?
I would back whatever the customer wants to do. Whoever, if someone buys my toy, I'm thankful enough that you bought one of my toys. You do whatever you want with it. Crack it open. I mean, it's wood. You could throw it into the fire, watch it burn.
Oh,
I don't, you know, you bought it. It's yours. It's you, you know. Who knows? Hey, I used to love destroying my toys when I was a kid. Like, I boy, once I got my first Bic lighter too, that was a game changer in destroying toys.
So you were the inspiration for Sid in Toy Story?
Yeah, there you go. Oh, you know, as well as I didn't even realize that, you know, I was kit bashing as a kid too, and I used to love, like, you know, putting little arms on my He-Man or something. It was just, but
You know, and I guess it's all depends on the individual maker. You know, I do not consider myself an artist. I don't make art. If anything, I would call myself a bootlegger. You know, I take other people's ideas and I kind of slap them together and go in a certain direction or whatever. And so if you want to open it, open it. If you want to throw out the packaging, throw it out. Once it leaves my hands and it's in yours, that's up to you.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
a little hurt though, you know, just a little.
Yes.
Break it up and then like show me the video of you doing it. It might be like, ooh, and that's.
Yeah.
I'll be like, oh, if I made some money off it, it's fine. I'll do another one.
I mean, at the end of the day, it really does come down to that artist ego versus, hey, I made money off of it and paid the rent of, you know, you have to have that internal reassurance of, hey, the point was to ultimately, you know, make some money by selling this in the first place. Otherwise I would have kept it for myself. But, you know, they can hang it behind the you know, bathroom door for all I care, as long as they paid for it. But yeah, you still feel at least a little bit hurt.
Yeah, I hope there's some appreciation to it.
I think that's I think we were talking earlier about like how do you do you determine how much time or money you put into something? And it's this balance of if you as the creator want them to hold on to the packaging, like how do you choose? How do you make it so desirable to hold on to that they don't throw it away, even if they do open it? To still keep it as a part of the collection, or even if it goes or to the point that they would feel bad throwing it away, because it conveys either its handmade nature or the artwork on it is worth kind of like having up on a thumbtack on your wall kind of thing. And I'm thinking about this for a couple of my own figures, and I'm like, one, I want mine to kind of look as though you would see it on a shelf in a store, that it would kind of have that level of quality. But I feel like I can. There are some tricks to do to kind of have the appearance of that quality, whether it's like a satin finish paper that you print on like a photo printer, or something like that kind of has that nice kind of commercial sheen to it. But that can be relatively inexpensive, low time. It might just be something you wrap around a cardboard box or something like that, as opposed to going full in and printing it on cardboard or something like that, and have a high cost there or something. But if you went that cheaper route, but still kind of had that commercial appeal to it, you might feel as the creator like, if they toss it, it's fine. It didn't cost me that much time or that much money. But if you went, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I guess the appearance and quality of the packaging could be done on the cheap or on the expensive. But if I guess I don't know if I did spend more time or more money on it, would it come across that way that someone would want to hold on to it, or maybe they just disregard the packaging altogether, take out the figures, put it on their shelf, and toss the box. But it seems like it's kind of this kind of a conundrum, and I think when I hear you guys talking about it, it's like it could go either way. There are collectors, there are buyers who would it's in their hands, but I feel like there is a bit of control I would like to have over that experience. Though granted, I also toss the iPhone box as well. As nice as it is, it's not worth keeping up. And it served its purpose. It got to me safely. Is the other perspective.
I have heard of a couple artists who actually, mind you, not when it is like each packaging is custom made, because obviously there's some folks out there that are meticulously hand painting each and every, card back or whatever, as its own, truly unique piece of art. But I've heard of some folks who are designing and having, commercially produced or whatever, ordering extras that, also on their site, they do the initial sale of the toy packaged, but then to the people that bought from them say, hey, I've got 10 or 20 extra just, card art left. If you tore yours open to play with the toy and, destroyed the card, hey, you can order an extra card back that is, display frame worthy or whatever in and of itself, which, it's not necessarily a bad idea as far as appeasing your collectors.
Yeah,
especially if you put a lot of time into making your card back. You're like, please. Here's an extra, here's a spare tire for you.
That's a nice added value, though, is selling the artwork that you would use for the card, even if it's in a different format. yeah, I again think of Cool of Gaba as like his pieces. I mean, the cards are also a large size relative to the figure, but those as even just a poster series, it can be another way to kind of get his art out there, if that's his choice as an artist to have kind of mass consumption, or a very limited run or something. But I could see artists who either do collabs with other artists for that kind of artwork. It can be a real extension of that brand's experience to say, all right, you got the toy, you got the card back, here's the poster series that's based on it, here are the trading cards that have the same art, and begin to expand the brand into a variety of sellable materials, products.
You've gotten to GABA a couple times, and I'm going to say I think it is interesting, only because we're talking about packaging. And if you do consider how he has marketed that current product, that's not packaging. It's pop art. So because he's actually technically illustrated on that backer, it's no longer, in my opinion, a packaging for a toy. Just in the way that he has marketed that item, you have to go to his website. You can buy a backer for $50, or you can buy a figure for a penny, but you can only buy a figure if you've already bought a backer. So he's not selling a figure and a packaging. He's actually selling a piece of art that you can buy a figure with it if you'd like for a penny. So I would actually say it's interesting you're saying it's packaging, because he's selling packaging then. He's claiming to be selling the packaging for $50 a package.
Yeah, the toy is like the card back.
and the toy has become the card back for him. And that's what, again, in my opinion, I've got to give him kudos, because kind of is a bit of that whole irony of pop art. It should kind of sometimes be a bit of a slap in the face. It's a little bit like data art. It's kind of a commentary. It is kind of jokes. Admittedly, if I have to hear one more person say that he has hand-drawn card backs when he has traced a picture, that is an interesting gimmick to be able to say I have a hand-drawn backer,
Right.
when you've traced a picture. So again, that's a very big play on the pop art, the culture, the scene. Like, it's kind of a bit of a running joke in a weird way. But I don't know if I'd call it packaging, because the packaging for him is the holographic box it comes in. Because he made it a big deal to sell a holographic box that he illustrates on. So I would even actually say his shipping box has become his packaging. Sorry. Just because you brought him up, and it was kind of like, that's a weird anomaly, actually, because not many dudes in the toy scene actually say, I'm going to sell you this painting for $50. You can get a plastic resin figure for a penny if you'd like. Kind of bold.
Yeah, that is.
Well, and that's the exact opposite that I was originally thinking. As I said earlier, it's just like, I was kind of expecting someone to be like, yeah, screw it, I don't like the packaging aspect of things, I'd rather not. And here's the exact polar opposite of, it's all about the packaging, and I don't care about the toy, which, I mean, that's great, because I mean, obviously, I don't think anybody else doing that.
And I like his toys. They're pretty detailed and cool looking. They got like penises and whatnot. Who doesn't like a good penis on a toy?
So then I think it even comes down to, personally, I would say, we kind of talked about the display purposes, the functionality outside the packages. Would you say that a sealed figure should have a different quality control if it's actually being displayed as a figure? And is it more of an homage to an action figure, or should it function as an action figure?
Well, I think that's up to the maker, right? If yeah, that's up to the maker. So if you are
I'm currently learning this now.
that's up to the maker. If you're making an homage and you want to entomb it in there forever, then I would say that your QC is going to be a lot lower. At least you could probably get away with it. But if you're calling it a posable, articulated figure, then guess what? Then your QC better be spot on when, you know, the person getting it opens it up and takes that thing out. You know, they're going to look at it. They're going to look for, at least I do anyway, you know, looking for seam lines, looking for bubbles, looking for where they missed paint or whatever, or just the opposite, looking at it and going, damn, this thing is really cool. So that's up to the maker, I think.
There'd be a statement is to say he's the figure is fully posable, but it really make it impossible to get it out of the package.
Yeah.
You put it in one of those hardware store tool packages. It's like the the like crimped plastic all the way around. You have to use scissors to cut out.
Oh, God, we love those, right?
I'd be curious though, because I've never actually had a maker outwardly express to me, like, just so you know, this is a display item. But I'm sure we've all had that moment, like on Turbo Man from Jingle All the Way, where all of a sudden you open it up and this thing is like in pieces in your hands type deal, and you're kind of like, okay, I get it was supposed to be on display, but it wasn't that rough. And then there's the other times too, where of course it's in a baggie or something, and you take it out of the baggie, you go to display it, and the person's like, well, it's a bootleg. Like, I didn't expect you to be handed. So I feel like, at what point, like, should it be up to the maker to almost make that differentiation or make that intent clear when they're marketing the figure, or is that kind of like a given? Or
I think it's one of those things that, you know, if your intent is people don't touch it, you know, leave it alone. It's an, you know, object of art. You know, I think you have to make it clear, because especially something like toys and packaging, you know, by nature, you know, what we see on the store shelves, you know, it's something, yeah, we do take down, we open up and we play with, if it was bought commercially. So for an artist to create a work of art that mimics that and not let people know, they really can't get mad. That's kind of like designing a bench, putting it in the middle of a gallery, and then getting pissed off at people sitting on it.
so I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking, but San BC, they're a sculptor. She doesn't do resin, doesn't do molds, but she made a little spiffy worm. And the reality is that she was very clear to me. She said, you know, this worm, it's never going to function like a toy because of the medium it is. Unfortunately, it just won't. It's too fragile. But I know you love toys. So I gave this guy a little tiny flag that goes into his hands because I wanted it to have something that you could kind of touch and handle. More of a nod to toys, to celebrate toys, but it can't behave like a toy. Perfect. I'll be more careful with this one.
Yep.
I don't feel there should be any shame in acknowledging that a piece is more for display purposes.
Right. And that's where it goes back to, you know, up to the individual maker. You know, that's it. If I'm with these projects I go forward, you know, and I've got these things, I'm imagining or thinking that people are going to take them out and they're going to display them. They're going to do whatever with them. So I develop them that way. But if I had made something and say, you know what, this is going to be my grand opus and it's going to sit on your shelf forever in its little thing, then I'm going to let you know, hey, you know what, this thing is solid gold and you shouldn't probably use it as a doorstop. You shouldn't do this with it or whatever. But again, that would be up to me to let you know. You know, otherwise you're going to chuck it in the lake next door or whatever.
I'm thinking about this exact issue with my #2 figure is like I wanted to have the articulation of the Kenner figures with the T-pegs. I want to have the hollow torso, but that means I got to figure out the how the torso fits together, how it stays glued together, and also knowing that the resin, not like PVC plastic, will be a little softer, might wear down a little faster than the PVC plastic, and I kind of want to do a test to say, you know, to see like how many times can I rotate the arm around before it gets loose, to say like this figure is good for only 50 rotations before it gets loose. to kind of put set some expectation there, and that yes, this is a handmade thing. Doesn't have the durability. You should not expect it to behave or last as long as a store-bought piece. And if the audience were broader, I feel like I might have to be more intentional about saying something like that. But I feel like through my own marketing and just to the audience, this would be I see buying this figure would kind of have that understood. But ultimately, there might be someone who buys it whose kid takes it off the shelf and now suddenly starts to play with it like it were a store-bought thing. I think I want to be a little bit cautious to maybe have just a little disclaimer at the bottom that says handmade, handled with care kind of thing, just to be safe, because I don't want people to be disappointed. But I also want to make something that does at least within the first 30 days still feels like it has the articulation of a well-known character, or toy brand.
I still have to be careful with that, because the issue comes realistically. I had two fall apart recently, and the issue is that when you message the person and say, "Hey, I want to be totally open with you. This happened," they can very easily say, "Well, no, because I test for that."
Yeah.
and the issue is that unfortunately, the more that you're sitting there going, "I know I've rotated those arms like 50 times. There's no way." Yeah. And the issue becomes is, unfortunately, they then think to themselves, "Well, you must not have been treating it like the item it is."
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's so tough. And I'll be honest, man, hollow bodies you're taking on a
what am I getting myself into?
Yeah, you're taking on a demon there. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, it goes back to that intention. This is my design. I'm keeping that in mind. How are people going to use this, if they're going to use it? So that's how I go forward with that.
I think that's where it probably makes good sense, at least to me, where I intend with any release to always be it on the back side where there's nothing else, or incorporate it exactly like it would be incorporated in a commercial product, to always have that little legal disclaimer, whether or not I really mean it or not, of this is an art object, it's not a toy, just so I'm always covered by, if somebody does, pull it out, start messing with it too hard and break it, that I can say, well, hey, unless, obviously you can kind of go, okay, you're a good customer. Hey, I'll make it good somehow. But, if it's just some, rando going, hey, this is all broken, you owe me a replacement. And you're kind of like, it did say on the package, I had my legal disclaimer here. It's on you, buddy. Depending upon, no matter how you want to play that thing, but at least you're always, covered for whatever scenario it might be.
And even kind of
maybe the key is to sell it in, just like nostalgia, sell it in pieces and make it a model that someone can assemble when they actually get it. You don't have to worry about how well the packaging has to deliver the item safely.
I'm strongly considering that, man. Maybe a piece that just comes in a little box of pieces and little. I'll send you some glue, and you can tack it together yourself.
Yeah. With the wooden pieces, especially, like that could be a nice little set to assemble.
Oh my! Kidding me? The hours you'd be spending doing that, people would be going insane, sending it back to you, saying, "Build it and send it back."
So that kind of sends me off in a slight tangent. That's kind of packaging related, kind of not, but doesn't, it lives its own little neck of the woods. Because when you talk about having to put pieces together yourself, it gets me thinking, and again, commercially marketing thinking of, wow, one spot where the corporations figured it out is like the build of figures. And I'm always thinking too of, well, if I develop a figure, what can I low cost put in there for added value to encourage people to buy, collect my pieces, hopefully multiple pieces. That is really nothing to me. And I know there are some artists that might occasionally throw in a box, here's a random a reject piece that had some bubbles in it, cost them nothing, it probably would have gone in the trash anyways, but it's a little thing to their collector of, hey, it's a reject, or here's some free stickers or something like that. And I guess my question is, is anybody here doing any kind of added little extras in those packages that aren't the toy themselves, but somehow add value to the toy or value to collecting more of it? Or has anybody heard or seen anybody that is doing something really interesting along those lines?
Mario, what was doing that?
Yeah.
When I got the El Bosco, he came with a clear resin version. So there's the painted version, but he included a clear one with it, just as I guess a little add-on. And yeah, maybe that was I think your initial casts, Mario, are clear and you paint them, right?
Yeah, so that's how, so there's a few miscasts the first couple times you cast a figure, so you set those aside, and I had a whole bunch, and I still have quite a few, so I'll just randomly throw them into people's packages, so there's that. And then there is the complete opposite, where guys like Titty Bean design a figure with he's got the removable brains, and then he'll send you an extra brain or two to go in there, and that to me is like, whoa,
Yeah.
swap out brains on this guy. That's really cool. But I and then he also includes keychains when you buy stuff with him, and they're miscast heads or whatever of figures that he's made, and he throws them in there too. I've kind of had that same idea, and my daughter was like, well, we could probably make like jewelry out of like miscast heads. And I was like, whoa. So it's just one of those things that I think the more I do this and the more miscasts I have set aside or whatever, then the more I'll throw them in there.
I get scared of saying anything about this because you don't want to crap on what anybody's doing, right? That's what makes all this stuff. Like, you don't want to be crapping on how anybody else is doing something. But I do think it gets tough again when you start working up added expenses. Always, like, the brain starts looking at, like, okay, so this is what I want to be able to charge for the item. Oh, but I've got to add in this. Oh, I've got to charge in this, and I've got to. And so the issue is when you've got like casts that you're saying, miscasts, probably casts that you're going to toss out anyways. That is cool. That's dope. And in that case, there, it even actually kind of coincide with the item where it's like, ooh, I can see what this was before the paint up. So it even actually adds a nice little like, ooh, and the brains that Titty Bean does, or like the extra sabers. But I'll admit, like, the stickers, I had to have artists explain to me that the stickers are a big thing because you guys like to pop them on your pots. If we don't have pots, we're sitting there wondering, well, man, how long were you sitting there cutting out all the, oh, you ordered, well, dang, to order how many stickers, how much did that end up costing? And your brain does start kind of enumerating, well, how much of this does work into your overhead? And all of a sudden it becomes things like, it could be trading cards they throw in, or sometimes it might be, there's a particular artist, again, you don't want to crap on it because he throws in candy. And the candy is a very big nod to his heritage, his upbringing. It's that candy. Well, that's awesome. It might not have hit a mark for me, but I noticed that when his drop came out, everybody that got his stuff, they were posting being like, yeah, I've got my candy in, and the toys were there too. And they were celebrating all these add-ons that came with the item. You can't hit everybody, right? And so at the end of the day, what is an add-on that's valuable to who? You hope that you know your market base, because I'm not normally somebody who's an average consumer of that person. So for me to get the candy, it's kind of like, it's not part of the story for me yet. But for his normal customer base, they expect that. That's part of the like, And I feel like that's kind of part of what you need to build in there. At this point, Titty Bean, the brains are almost like that. I've got more brains. When you get a helium maid, oh yeah, we've got the 2 heads. Like those all become part of it. But what that is to your customer, like that's no one man could tell you that.
Unless you do that packaging or that marketing tactic. Yeah, I guess it's a marketing tactic, sales tactic, where if you're making a series of figures, you put one part of the 6th figure in each of those 5. And I haven't seen anyone in this community do that. Has someone done that?
No, but I told One Trick Pony. So straight up, I told him probably on by like the 4th one. If he had done it, he sent me the leg on the very first one. If he had done it, I would have a whole mismatched Swamp Thing at this point. There are certain things that dudes I do think could be thinking out in that way. Even Yucko, I think he has a perfect opportunity with the wooden Yucko cards. In my opinion, that should be something where you get like a frequent flyer thing, and that's when you get the Yucko wooden thing. Don't worry about giving out the Yucko wooden plaque with every single purchase, because if I buy 2, 3 items, I now have 3 of these plaques, 4 of these plaques. Well, I'm not Yucko, so I have 4 Yucko plaques. It doesn't. But if I buy from you 5 times, and on the 5th time you message me and you're like, "Yo, man, this order's your 5th," you get a Yucko club member wooden authentic thing. Something you're like, yeah, I get to show off that I'm a Yucko fan club member. Darn right.
Purchase.
And I feel like it's almost building that up. You have to build that luster for it. And maybe like a last point to kind of touch on that we've got on the sheet here. How does packaging affect the shipping method? Because of course things are going to cost more depending on the size of the box, depending on the weight of the box. So when you start thinking about packaging, do you consider how it's going to ship?
I don't sell enough to mind that. So if you buy one of my toys, I'll ship it. Happy to ship it to you. It's fine.
Yes. So for me, this dream project is going to be, it's a carded figure. And as a collector, when I go to stores and I buy figures, I look at the packaging, I look at the card. Is it wavy? Is it warped? Is it dinged? Is the bubble busted? So yeah, I've taken that into consideration. So you either buy a box that the bubble and the card will fit in there nicely and will ship and arrive in one piece. I haven't really sourced any of that out yet, but that's on my mind.
Does anybody have a go-to yet that, I tried all packing peanuts once and, 50 people complained that they, didn't survive being shipped, or, I use all bubble wrap, or, what have
Bubble
you.
wrap can never go wrong with. I mean, just with experience with, many other items and things that I've shipped and had to deal with, even just with props and stuff at work. Bubble wrap is the best and always the go-to as far as protecting anything. Mm-hmm. Everything else I've ever used, I've always had breaks somewhere here and there. Bubble wrap's always good.
Mm-hmm. I've with the armature kit, I put a little piece of cardboard inside the plastic bag. And it's like a 2x3 inch plastic bag, like super small. But that added rigid cardboard insert. I think no one has messaged me that the thing is completely broken, even though it comes in pieces. But it does have parts where I would be afraid if it did get knocked, the wrong way, it could break some of the parts that I've welded together. And so as like an added benefit or added security, putting something more rigid in there, I think would help. With shipping a card back, getting an extra piece of cardboard to go behind it would just be an added measure, in addition to being wrapped. Yeah. You could think of like foam for those more precious carded figures, some kind of like foam insert, which the price begins to go up as you start thinking about that. But if you're really worried, that could be another direction.
Which is, a real concern, because you don't want anything that, mess your toy up in the shipping process, Don't want to bend a corner of your card back or dent the bubble at all. So, yeah.
Well, and then this goes back to, again, the original intent of the maker, right? So if my first generation release of this Polish bootleg is supposed to be an absolute piece of crap, or at least look like it, then the cardboard, then the backer isn't going to be straight, right? It's going to be curved. It's going to be notched. It's going to be messed up. So, take, again, that in mind with the first couple of releases. But again, I will put that on the post or make sure that anyone who buys it understands that intention. So my intent is the first couple of waves, it's got to look like a trashy bootleg. And that's my intent. I want it to look that way.
That's awesome.
And then with subsequent releases, it'll get better. So the packaging will get better, the painting will get better. But that
you can soak the cardboard and it'll get all wavy before you even print on it.
Yep. Yep.
Awesome.
So that's my intent.
There you go.
Love it. Hey, I gotta get going, guys. I got an early morning mountain bike thing, but this was awesome, Crumbs. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody here listening to me yap about things. Y'all are awesome. Till next time.
Yep.
Sounds
Thanks for
good.
joining.
Thanks for joining, man.
Yep. Have a good one.
Thanks, man.
I think we even kind of touched on basically everything there. The only thing I would mention, Scott, is you're asking about like bubble wrap and stuff. Personally, I've seen there's actually tons of different types of bubble wrap, dude. I know it sounds ridiculous, but like depending on what you're sending, there's like the log tube ones that'll be in like big long strips, and like each one of those pockets full of air. There's like bubble bag types that you actually put it in there and you can wrap the bag around it. There's ones, the big giant bubbles. It's going to depend on what you're packaging, but I think everybody would kind of agree that sending anything in just a regular old envelope, you're gonna have to be a little bit more careful. And that doesn't matter if it's a backed figure or it's a bagged figure. Shipping is always gonna be a pain in the butt to deal with.
Yep.
I love it. Well, you know what? I think even if sometimes you gotta say toys, if anybody doesn't have anything else to add, I think this would be a great ending point for the evening.
I just want to bring up like one other kind of thing that I consider packaging that isn't like officially packaging is like my posts, right? So like on a release or up to the subsequent release, I will post, okay, this is a figure that's going to be in this wave. Here's his story. This is why he's named this way, and so on. So it's not actually on the actual item that you get, but it's on the post and it gives that story, so it's got a crappy little, piece of paper that I printed for the actual figure, but the actual story behind it is on the post. So hopefully, for those people that actually like my stuff, they'll take the time and they'll read the post and get all the details.
Well, and it's interesting because there's two sides to that actually. So you're actually saying that you use your Instagram as kind of a place to showcase your backer or the history of the figure. And then you have other people, like I know right now, there's an individual who they're releasing it where they've blurred out the backers on the picture. So that way those who buy them get to know the lore of the figure. And otherwise, like those who look at them, you don't get to know all the backstory for the figures yet. And I thought that was actually a cool little touch where he's actually keeping it almost secret lore for those who buy. It's cool. Again, I think at the end of the day, it's always going to come down to intent, and we're always going to end up at the same place. It's always whatever the artist kind of intends to do, right? Most
right.
You're going to end there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting idea, whether or not to, reveal the backer to everybody, because obviously, you could potentially miss sales because you didn't know how cool the backer was.
Right.
So other than people that are purely interested in the toy or longtime collectors of your work, it's a gamble.
I was intentional about not showing what my instruction manual looked like in my first shipment, in my first drop, because I did want those people who got the first ones to kind of be surprised by opening it. And then once they started posting what they received, then I was like, okay, now I can start sharing this because it's out there. But yeah, I guess you only get that opportunity with the first round.
Yeah, it all gets down to also, you've got an idea and you're excited about it and you want to share, but at the same time, you're like, man, I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah.
Or I don't want this to get out and then find out that somebody's already made this or did something with it. So it's one of those things where you're like, do I or do I not?
Yeah.
But I totally get it.
It's called demand generation in the market world.
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna end the recording there.